and welcome to episode 69 of Battlefield 4 News. And today we've got two stories that could drastically change the way the game is played. One concerns damage and one concerns rush. Now the damage changes are only hinted at in a forum post. The changes to rush we now have much more detail on, so we know what they're going to change to the overall mode and what they're going to change to a couple of the maps. So the changes to the damage system are hinted at in a post by Tiggy. If you don't know who Tiggy is, well, I'm probably getting his name wrong, but he's a DICE developer. And it's in response to a video that shows the player flying around in a helicopter and then instantly dying to a bulldog. Now this is on the CTE server, which has got all the netcode improvements running on it. And Tiggy's post in reply says, "Interesting, this kind of confirms my insta-kill theory. In this case I'd say it's DPS in combination with packet loss spikes. Lowering damage overall could help, and we've also got an experimental netcode server-side fix that might help." So this isn't the first time that DICE have hinted at lowering the damage overall. So what they would do is reduce the DPS of all the guns in the game. By lowering the DPS of every gun in the game, you're not going to affect the game balance, but what you are going to affect is the way that packet loss affects damage. So for an example, let's say you're shooting at somebody and it takes you a second to kill them. So you hit them with 4 shots in that second and they die. Now let's say the player that you're shooting at has been suffering from packet loss during that second. So he hasn't received the information that you've been shooting him, hit him 4 times, and he's died. The server, to catch up, just kills him. So to him it looks like he's instantly died. Then let's imagine that you've reduced the DPS, and for an extreme example we've halved it. So instead of taking a second to kill him, you've taken 2 seconds to kill him. If he suffers the same packet loss for that first second, he's not going to instantly die when he gets the information back. So effectively what you're doing is reducing the effect of packet loss by reducing the DPS in the game. If it takes longer to kill somebody, then packet loss has less of an effect. Now, are they going to do this in Battlefield 4? I would think definitely not, at least on the live game. They might do it on CTE to try it out for future Battlefield titles, but Battlefield 4 changing the DPS would dramatically change the feel of the game, and I don't think they'll do that. But in future, you might see that guns do less damage. So why is this an issue in Battlefield 4 when it wasn't really an issue in Battlefield 3? Well, the answer to that is simple. It's the next gen consoles. The Xbox 360 and PS3 effectively have their own version of Frostbite because they have completely different architectures to a PC. The Xbox One and the PS4, because they're effectively running PC architecture, are running the same version of Frostbite, or DICE are trying to get them to run the same version of Frostbite. But to do that they're having to make compromises, and it's those compromises that we're seeing in Battlefield 4. Will they get it right? Yes, they will. Unfortunately, Battlefield 4 has suffered from being the first title that they were trying to do it on. Our next piece of news comes direct from DICE via the CTE forums, or it's their CTE News Update blog, and it involves the changes they're making to Rush. So let's have a look at what they say. We decided on this initiative because we felt we could increase the quality of the Rush experience in the BF4 base game maps by small means such as tweaking vehicle setup or MCOM placement. With CTE up and running, we have the great opportunity to get some player feedback on some changes we've playtested internally, and see if there's something we want to push live. So the first thing to note there is that this is going to happen on the base game maps, so there's going to be no changes to the DLC maps that are already out. It's also clear that this isn't guaranteed to come to live, this is something they're just going to be testing. The main focus of these changes has been to increase the balance and flow of rush rounds. Often this means making it easier for the attackers to tackle certain MCOMs that were frustrating. Worst offenders were maps where it was rare to see attackers progress past the first base. So it sounds like they've checked the scores for each map in Rush and then seen how many times the attackers win, how many times the defenders win, how many times the attackers were just completely shut out, and then they've rebalanced those maps, hopefully to make it 50-50. So the first changes they're making are to the mode as a whole. And the first one is a big one a lot of people have been asking for. Removed Commander by default in Rush. Now this doesn't mean Commander mode has been removed from Rush entirely. What it does mean is that server admins will have to deliberately turn Commander mode on their Rush servers. The second change reduces the radar sweep range around attacker bases. So if the server does have Commander mode on, it's going to be less effective at detecting the attackers, or at least detecting the attackers as they move out of their base. They also want to add a round start timer. Now if you've seen Hardline or played Hardline, you may have noticed that each round starts with a timer, where players have to say that they're ready, and when enough players on a team are ready, then the round will start. And I imagine this is what they want for Rush. What it does is it means that both teams have got players ready at the start, and it also means that players like me with fancy SSD drives don't spawn before everybody else. On some maps I get a good 5 seconds head start over other players. And the last point here is made sure that final attacker tickets are not reset after the last base explodes. Now I don't know why that's important. I'm assuming it's for scoring the round, but if it's not, we'll have to wait and see until the full patch notes come out so I know what it actually means. But the two big changes there are removing Commander mode and adding the start round timer. Start round timer is going to mean that the starts of the rounds are going to be more balanced and equal, and removing the Commander mode is going to mean that attackers can push up and remain off the map. You can flank, you can surprise your opponents, and you can actually use tactics without the Commander just putting up a UAV and telling everybody where you are. So next we have the changes they've made to Siege of Shanghai, and the first one I'm a bit confused about. Removed all air vehicles to make this a land strike in Rush. The helicopter that the attackers got was really useful, and if you use that properly it stopped all the stalemates. But I guess we'll have to see how it plays. The second one, cutting the power to all the elevators in the map, does sound like a good idea. So if you have removed all the air vehicles and you've cut the powers to the elevators, there's going to be no rooftop camping. So everybody's going to be effectively on the ground level or the first floor in some of the buildings. They've tweaked MCOM positions of all bases. Base 2 was especially problematic for attackers if they didn't have enough momentum. So base 2 was the underground shopping area, and I actually really liked that. I thought that was a really good Rush set of MCOMs, both for attacking and defending. But I guess if you are attacking, it can be a bit tricky trying to get down just 3 different stairwells into that underground area. They've tweaked the vehicle setup. So I think at the moment it's a tank and 2 armoured trucks for the attackers and a tank for the defenders. I think it's the same on most of the spawn points. So I imagine that maybe the attackers have got an extra tank and 1 less truck. That would make sense to make it slightly weighted in favour of the attackers. They've slightly tweaked certain combat areas and spawns. Now I can see this happening on the first set of bases that are in the underground parking garage. The defenders spawn very close to the back of that building, and the attackers go out of bounds if they try going around the back of the building. So I can see that being adjusted slightly maybe some of the others, I'm not sure. Added a few cover pieces to go with the updated MCOM positioning. So if you move the MCOMs, you need cover near the MCOMs for it to actually work out. So this is going to be an interesting set of changes for Siege of Shanghai. Removing the air vehicles and removing access to the roofs is going to make it much less of a campy game. This is a map where you can get stalled on the first set of MCOMs and just get nowhere. But if you get momentum up, you can steam all the way through it. So it'll be interesting to see what the changes are, whether it makes it more consistent. The other map that they're doing these balancing changes on is Zavod 311. And they've said that they wanted to make this map easier for attackers, particularly on bases 1 and 4. Now the problem I have with making base 1 easier on Zavod is that it makes base 2 easier. Because if you can start rolling and keep on rolling, you can do 2 and 3 quite quickly. 4 is a real tricky assault. So yes, making 4 a bit easier is okay, but I don't think base 1 needed to be easier. There's a major rebalance on vehicles in favour of attackers. For example, transport helicopter given to attackers from base 2 and onwards. This is especially helpful on the impossible last base. So they've taken all the air out of Siege of Shanghai but put more air into Zavod 311, a map that has a notorious camping building in the middle. Not really sure that's going to work. Tweaks on the MCOM positions and minor changes to elements such as combat areas and spawns. They've added a few pieces of additional cover, which you're going to have to do if you move the MCOMs, and they've reduced terrain crater depth, which is something they should do across all modes. For some reason on Zavod and a couple of other maps, you can basically dig yourself a bunker in the ground with explosives. So yes, they should reduce the crater depth, and that will make vehicles flow easier across the ground, and it will stop people hiding in massive holes. So I can understand the changes they've made on Siege of Shanghai. I'm not so sure about the changes they've made on Zavod, especially making base 1 easier to attack and putting a transport helicopter in on a map that's got an eminently campable roof. But I guess we'll have to wait and see how they play out, and these should be coming to the CTE servers either today or tomorrow. They were supposed to be coming yesterday, but there was a problem with the update and they haven't been done. Now I have some footage of Zavod and Siege of Shanghai Rush on my hard drive from the live Battlefield servers, so when they make these changes I'll be able to do some comparison videos to say this is what it used to be like, this is what it's now like, and I'll give it a week or so and then do an opinion on what the changes are like. But it's been obvious since the start of Battlefield 4 that the rush mode just wasn't as popular or as good as it was in Battlefield 3. So hopefully this can do something to redressing it, at least on the base maps. So that's it for this episode of Battlefield 4 News. Thanks for watching.